General Hospital will reveal Port Charles is on the verge of erupting with unexpected emotional sparks, as a wave of steamy and dramatic kisses is rumored to be on the horizon. These aren't just fleeting romantic moments, they have the potential to become turning points in various relationships, pushing boundaries and stirring up hidden feelings like never before. As unlikely pairs suddenly discover unexpected chemistry, and old flames find themselves pulled back into each other's orbit, the landscape of Port Charles is about to change forever. Let's take a closer look at who might be at the center of these fiery upcoming kisses, because love, betrayal, and long-suppressed emotions are all ready to explode with just one unforgettable kiss. Lucky was living in a whirlwind of emotions and duty, with the weight of a dangerous secret about Christina bearing down on him each day. The car accident she caused wasn't just a criminal matter, it was a moral dilemma, a test of loyalty, a war between his instincts as a protector and his responsibility to the truth. As someone who had suffered great losses and made his share of mistakes, Lucky knew the cost of revealing the truth at the wrong time. Instead of exposing Christina, he chose to shield her. Concealing every detail from the authorities, and from Elizabeth, the woman with whom he was trying to rebuild trust after years of separation. But Christina was no longer just the girl who had made a terrible mistake, she had become an obsession, something new, dangerous, but irresistibly real. Their secret meetings to coordinate their version of events became charged with more than anxiety. Glances lingered longer, fingers brushed too often, silences grew heavier. It all culminated one stormy night, when Christina showed up at the remote cabin Lucky had been using as a hideaway. The tension between them finally broke.
That first kiss didn't come from romance but from fear and desperation, a shared need for someone who understood. What followed was inevitable, a surrender to emotions neither could deny.
Boundaries shattered, logic disappeared, and they fell into each other as if it were the last time they'd ever feel alive. The morning after, Christina woke with the blanket wrapped around her. Watching Lucky sitting silently by the window. Neither said a word, because the line they'd crossed was no longer something they could undo. Lucky felt the crushing weight of betrayal, not just to Elizabeth, but to himself and every value he once held. Yet he couldn't deny the connection he felt with Christina. It wasn't just passion or guilt, it was the bond of two broken people clinging to each other beneath the ruins of their own moral collapse. Back in town, Elizabeth began to sense the change. Lucky had grown distant, more evasive, more distracted. His hugs felt forced, his smile half-hearted. She started piecing things together in silence. Eventually receiving the truth not through a confession, but through a photograph sent anonymously. In it, Christina was seen leaving the cabin early in the morning, disheveled, dazed.
While Lucky stood behind her on the porch, his posture heavy with guilt. Elizabeth didn't yell or accuse. She simply stared at Lucky with the hollow look of someone whose soul had been fractured.
The confrontation that followed was a storm of grief, not just for a broken romance, but for the collapse of a life she thought she understood. The man who had once sworn to protect her had now sacrificed their future to shield someone else. Christina, too, spiraled into panic. The truth was out, not just about the accident, but about her involvement with Lucky. She feared losing him, feared the judgment of the town, feared what she saw in the mirror. The investigation reopened. Evidence surfaced. Christina stood on the edge of being prosecuted. Lucky tried to take the fall, but his confession only made things worse. Authorities uncovered the affair, adding fuel to the scandal. Lucky was ostracized from the community, his image dismantled, his credibility in ruins. Elizabeth packed her things and left, taking the children. Vowing never to let them grow up in a world where their father protected a criminal out of lust. Christina crumbled. What she thought was a deep, emotional connection now felt like a catastrophic mistake. She no longer knew what to believe, about Lucky, about herself, about the world that had suddenly turned cold and unforgiving. Sitting in the interrogation room, her tears weren't just for the crash or the affair, but for the final piece of herself that she had lost. She hadn't just destroyed a family, she had obliterated the last shred of dignity she had left. The story of Lucky and Christina may have begun as an act of compassion. A misguided choice to protect rather than condemn. But it slid into chaos, into betrayal, into irreversible consequences. In the complex world of Port Charles, where every decision sparks a chain reaction, love is not always salvation, it can be a curse masked by desire. And this time, it was Lucky, once the embodiment of justice and conscience, who proved how devastating forbidden love could be. Elizabeth once believed she was well acquainted with emotional chaos. With the undercurrents that flowed beneath relationships that seemed stable but always carried the threat of collapse. Yet everything began to shift when Isaiah entered her life, not just as a colleague, but as a quiet anchor in moments she never anticipated. He wasn't loud or intrusive. He was simply there, at the right time and in the right way. After all the heartbreak she had endured with Lucky, she no longer opened her heart easily or trusted without caution. But there was something about Isaiah that made her feel safe, not in a romantic whirlwind kind of way, but in the warm, steady presence that allowed her to stop thinking for a moment and just breathe. Isaiah, on the other hand, was simmering with quiet disappointment. He had once believed strongly in Jordan. Trusted that what they had could evolve into something more than just professional alliance. But her decision to compromise with Jen Sidwell, a man Isaiah viewed as a serious threat, shattered that trust, not only in her, but in the ideals he had held close. In that space of disillusionment, Elizabeth emerged like a lifeline. They didn't need explanations. They didn't need to share every detail. Sometimes, they just sat beside each other, saying nothing at all. And yet it was everything they needed. When Lucky's secret began to grow too heavy for Elizabeth to carry alone, it was Isaiah she turned to. She didn't divulge the full truth, but he understood. Her eyes said more than her words ever could, and the weariness in her posture spoke volumes. He didn't press her for answers. He simply sat beside her, handed her a warm cup of tea, and told her, without saying it aloud, that she didn't have to face any of it alone. That quiet reassurance was everything she needed. And from that moment, something began to shift between them, not quickly, not explosively, but deeply and undeniably. On a rainy night, as thunder rumbled through the hospital windows, Elizabeth rested her head on Isaiah's shoulder, feeling, for the first time in months, like she had found something solid to lean on. Not the complicated kind of protection that Lucky offered, or the painful passions that once left her broken, but something simpler, stronger. Isaiah turned toward her, eyes soft with hesitation, as if asking an unspoken question. And in that moment, Elizabeth no longer thought of boundaries. She wasn't thinking about Lucky, or the secrets, or the consequences. She was only thinking about one thing: Isaiah was here, with her, for her. The kiss came gently, as if it had always been meant to happen. It wasn't rushed or overwhelming, but it was real. So real that Elizabeth trembled slightly. To her, it wasn't just the beginning of something new, it was the first time in a long time that she didn't have to pretend she was okay. Their relationship wasn't something either of them had planned. It grew from grief, from loss, from the quiet ache of past wounds they both carried without complaint. Isaiah didn't want to replace anyone in Elizabeth's life, he just wanted to be the one who showed up, who stayed. And when their eyes met after that kiss, there was no need for words. They both knew that something new had begun, something that didn't need to be labeled or promised, only lived, honestly, together. Even if the road ahead remained uncertain and full of unseen challenges. Jordan entered her mission with Sidwell armed with the confidence and discipline of a seasoned operative. But she quickly realized the game was far more complex than any scenario she had prepared for. Tasked with infiltrating and dismantling one of the most dangerous and powerful figures in the criminal underworld, Jen Sidwell, she knew she would have to sacrifice more than usual. At first, she approached him as a fully qualified assistant, intelligent, sharp, punctual, and discreet. Sidwell, ever suspicious, kept her at arm's length, but his gaze soon betrayed another intention. He didn't just want control over her professionally, he wanted to test the boundaries between power and desire. Jordan understood all too well that to get to the core of Sidwell's operation, she needed more than surveillance and reports. She had to earn his trust. She had to become the woman he believed he was manipulating, when in reality, it was she who was pulling the strings. Feigning interest, sometimes even flirting with calculated charm, became one of her most vital weapons. But it also led her into a dangerous gray zone between her professional role and a seductive game she never meant to play. Sidwell began to open up. He invited her to private meetings. Exclusive events that only his most trusted allies were allowed to attend. Jordan never declined, even as each close encounter felt like she was gambling with her dignity and soul. One night, in a lavish penthouse with rain tapping against the windows, Sidwell handed her a glass of wine and stood so close she could feel his breath. Jordan knew the moment had come. She leaned in. Their lips touched, a kiss not born of affection, but strategy. A silent weapon cloaked in softness. That kiss lowered Sidwell's guard. He began to reveal more. Leading her deeper into his criminal empire, exposing underground networks, confidential intel, and even plans targeting high-level individuals. But with each revelation, Jordan found herself edging closer to a moral precipice. Every night, as she stared into the mirror, her expression grew more uncertain. She was deceiving a dangerous man. Yes, but also deceiving herself, trying to believe she was still in control. Sidwell, with the instincts of a predator, began sensing something was off. But instead of cutting her off, he tested her loyalty in his own way, a trial that, if failed, could cost her everything. Jordan knew she had to go further, to step into a darker territory she once swore she'd never touch. In that moment, she realized that to bring down a demon, sometimes you have to be willing to walk through hell. Every move she made from that point was deliberate. She memorized every detail. Every phrase, every flicker in Sidwell's expression, all while maintaining the perfect mask of a woman enticed by power and desire. But inside, her heart began to sound silent alarms. She had gone too far, and the path back was now more blurred than ever. If Sidwell discovered the truth, he wouldn't just destroy her, he would annihilate everyone she was trying to protect. Jordan was not the kind of woman to break easily, but this time, she was playing a game where even the smallest mistake could be paid in blood. And while she maintained an outward calm, inside she was slowly being eroded by the battle between her mission, her instincts, and the consequences no plan could fully account for. Because to take down Sidwell, she wouldn't just need to win, she would have to survive. Jason had long believed he was no longer capable of falling in love again. The losses, the sacrifices, the wounds that never quite healed had turned him into a man who lived more for duty than for emotion. But Sasha, somehow, quietly slipped into his thoughts, not loudly, not deliberately, but like a winter breeze brushing skin long accustomed to the cold. The first time they kissed, it was merely part of a carefully staged act to protect a child. To keep everything under control as part of a legal strategy. But in that brief moment when their lips met, Sasha's eyes gave something away, something real, something Jason couldn't forget. As time passed, their relationship evolved into something more than collaboration. Meetings once rooted in obligation became quiet, necessary moments where Jason felt truly heard without judgment. And Sasha felt safe, not because someone was protecting her, but because someone understood her. Jason began to notice the little things. The way Sasha laughed when the morning light spilled through the window, or the way she tilted her head when deep in thought. And Sasha, who once believed she could never open her heart again after so much loss, found herself growing breathless whenever Jason walked silently into a room. Their connection blossomed from small gestures, from Jason's patience, from Sasha's quiet strength, from the mutual respect they had for each other's past. But that sincerity made everything more dangerous. Loving a man like Jason, a man who always stood at the edge between law and darkness, was never going to be easy. And for Jason, loving a woman like Sasha, a woman already wounded so deeply, was like trying to hold a candle in a storm. One wrong gust and everything could vanish. When they finally came together again, this time for no reason other than genuine emotion, the kiss wasn't part of any charade, it was an unspoken confession of all they had tried so hard to bury. Jason gently cupped Sasha's cheek. Not like a bodyguard, but like a man trembling in the presence of something fragile and precious. Sasha wrapped her arms around him, not for protection, but to hold on to a moment she wasn't sure would come again. Yet as their feelings deepened, complications began to arise. Those around them began to question the relationship, not just because of their different pasts, but because of the unavoidable ties to Sunny, Carly, and the underground world Jason could never quite leave behind. Sasha wasn't just a woman rebuilding her life, she was a vulnerable target in a world where kindness could be exploited. Jason knew that. He knew one mistake, one leaked detail, and everything could fall apart. And Sasha, even with a heart slowly catching fire, couldn't stop wondering. Could Jason ever truly be the ordinary man she needed, or would he always be a part of the world she once ran from? In the weeks to come, their relationship will be tested not only by personal emotions but also by secrets, danger, and the hard choices between love and survival. But no matter what happens, Jason and Sasha have already crossed a line. This is no longer make-believe, no longer an act, but two real people, feeling something real, in a world that never makes room for love without a price. Cody and Molly had gone through a strange journey, from casual conversations to a deepening connection that neither of them had expected. At first, their closeness was nothing more than friendship. A shared understanding between two people who had both faced loss, pressure from family, and internal conflict. But over time, the moments they spent together began to take on a different meaning, longer glances, more genuine laughter, and a growing comfort in silence that felt more intimate than mere friendship. Neither of them said it aloud, but both could feel that something between them was quietly evolving. The mix-up on the red carpet at the nurses' ball wasn't just a funny moment, it was a catalyst that changed everything. When Molly and Cody were mistaken for a real couple by the press and their friends, they had to play along, pretending to be romantically involved. But as they held hands walking through the crowd, smiled for cameras, and exchanged subtly knowing glances to maintain their act, something deeper stirred inside them. Molly felt a warmth in Cody's hand unlike anything she'd known before. And Cody, watching Molly laugh with him not out of politeness but because she was genuinely happy, realized his heart was beginning to betray his logic. After the gala, the air between them shifted. They no longer avoided prolonged eye contact or brushed off accidental touches. Then, standing backstage under the soft glow of fading lights, surrounded by the distant hum of a winding-down party, Cody turned to Molly, his gaze hesitant but determined. Molly, instead of pulling away as she once thought she would, stepped closer. And there, in the midst of the afterglow of the night's spectacle, they shared their first kiss, not for the sake of appearances, not to keep up a lie, but because they could no longer deny the truth inside them. That kiss didn't just redefine their relationship, it forced both to confront their choices. Molly had a stable life, a clear career path, and the weight of family expectations. Cody was a free spirit, carrying old wounds and lingering doubts about his place in the world. Yet despite coming from vastly different backgrounds, they had found in each other a peace no one else could offer. In the days following the nurses' ball, rumors spread quickly. Friends started asking questions. Family members grew curious. Molly questioned whether this was just a moment of vulnerability or the beginning of something real. Cody, who had always avoided commitment, found himself wanting to protect the fragile emotion that had bloomed between them at any cost. They both knew that moving forward would mean crossing lines they couldn't uncross. But they also understood that if they didn't take this chance, they might miss something rare and irreplaceable, a true love that arrived when they least expected it. From someone they never imagined they would fall for. And so, Cody and Molly's story was no longer about a mistaken identity on a red carpet, it became about two brave hearts willing to discover what might happen when they finally gave their true feelings the freedom to breathe.